And I think for another production architecture, Marvin, do you want to speak a little bit about the issues, the architecture that you have, some issues that you've seen, and what were the actual fixes that you put into place to alleviate some of those?
Okay, sure. I'm just going to poll the audience. So how many people here create content? You are, okay. How many people here, okay, one guy. Yeah, run. No. How many people here would say that they write code? They're a developer. How many people here are in a system operations role, gear boxes? And, okay. And then how many people here are more executive management decision maker? Okay, so I'm not going to get too deep into the box side because it'll just scare everybody. And actually, it's been really covered very well by the last two speakers. But okay, let me get my happy laser beam. Okay, so as you can see, we have a virtual private cloud that we're using from Logicworks. So basically, it's kind of like an Amazon type of system, the cloud. But you don't really, in my experience, want to use them for all your services because you don't get the immediate control that you might want, especially for some of the database services. You'll find that it doesn't really scale as well for an enterprise from talking around. So we keep it at Logicworks, not to make it a commercial. But I think with Drupal, you don't really have to worry too much about your application server. All of your work is going to be living in MySQL. So if you come from like a traditional background of like end-tier architecture where there's like application, then data, then presentation, like Drupal just throws it out the window and like everything happens in MySQL or MySQL, right? So that causes lots of problems. So traditionally you make a PHP page and it goes to the database, it gets a couple of elements, it builds a static page, and you send that to the user. Maybe that was what? I don't know, 10 calls in the database and like, 4 calls on your box, right? And let's say 10 assets and you put them in CDN. Happy days, right? With Drupal, you're gonna make like 10,000 calls, right? So that's a huge difference, right? So if you write code or you do architecture and you're not really versed in how your page gets created, you spend a lot of time in this like PHP world, you're gonna find a lot of pain in Drupal out of box, right? I think no one will tell you that Drupal out of box is a CMS. It's more the tool that you architect your CMS. So a huge part of this whole conversation should really be around who are you going to partner with? Does your team have the capabilities to maintain this? Are you going to be able to do all the tests that the economist does in order to roll things out to production? If you feel like you don't have the acumen or you don't have the appetite for that type of maintenance and tweaking to optimize for performance, then maybe you want to reconsider what route you're going to take for your business over the long term. It's solvable if you have expertise. I mean, for me, it's easy, right? I just call Rolando at Logicworks, and he answers, right? And I just make a phone call to Danny and Stephanie, and everything gets done. But if you don't have, let's say, system operation resources, if you can't solve some of your production problems by having access to your boxes and making tweaks, because some people don't. You use some managed host and you don't have that capability, then I would say you probably want to go away from or reconsider how you're going to approach these problems. Because it's pretty well solved, as was discussed in Drupal 7, and even for Drupal 6 and 5, there's just things people do. But you will find anyone who uses Drupal, like the first thing everyone talks about is cache. Cache just rules your life. So that's definitely a consideration. So for example, if you have a finance site and your data changes very often and you can't really present people 8 o'clock's information at noon, your issues with handling Drupal will be different than a media site where a show is a show and the same show happened on Monday as it did on Tuesday, right? So it's okay to present a cached copy. If you have a lot of authenticated users and they're changing information, then the way that you solve these problems will be totally different than the way we do. When I first came into Oxygen, I was not a fan of Drupal, right? So I had to just inherit it. And then like 2 weeks later, the site goes down and we're all like, how's that possible? We have so much hardware supporting the site. But it was all because the prior administration forgot to index a table, right? And that was a table because Drupal is going to crawl every single entry in that table, and it was huge. Like, if you don't have someone that's going to be able to find that for you, is that the first thing you're going to think about? I don't know. That's not the first thing I was going to think about, right? That's solved already. You're going to have to actively solve that problem. Same thing for like if you don't know what squid or varnish is, like if you use Drupal, you will. You will get very familiar with opcode and optimizing your code for performance. And that has to do with scale. Like in the television space, like no one's going to a show when it's off season. When's the last time you went to your favorite show when it wasn't in season, their website? Unless you had a bet, right? Probably not. But when it's on, you're gonna get a huge peak. Like Bad Girls Club is on, someone slaps somebody, we're gonna get 3 million people on our server in like half an hour. Like, so the difference between managing for long-term traffic and managing for scaling up peaks, and that 3 million people all making 4,000 calls, like, that's gonna crash you, right? Unless you're prepared to give them some static operations of the call. So I would say that the lesson is not really about spinning up things in your private cloud. That's great to have, but you'll find if your application does well, you could probably run Drupal and have, I don't know, 30, 40 million hits and on like 3 or 4 Apache boxes, right? You're happy. But you're going to start talking about, well, should I use solid state or should I not for my MySQL, and how much memory should each box have? And look at the slow query log like every day or every week, because that is going to kill you eventually. So I would just say that for us, getting out of some of the problems was all about partnering with experts and rededicating ourselves, opposed to being application writers, to being system writers and architects dedicated to performance.